Mystic Beginnings. One, Prime of Life Ritual. Life wasn't what it seemed. For me, today, everything I'd ever known would come crashing down. This world was drowning in secrecy. Soon I'd discover the lies hidden within it, and why everyone around me wanted my death. It is without malice and with purity of sanctum that we gaze upon the luminescence of the moon, the guiding light for all existence. We must prostrate ourselves before its splendor, for we are the children of Nocturna. We, the chosen, are the only true intelligence in this universe, exclaimed Amelia Lai, the new priestess and second within the Prime Temple. Many temples housed priestesses and guardians throughout the world. I was lucky to call the Prime Temple my home, as Nocturnus Pinnacle, or Noc Penna for short, headed by the Supreme Sovereign, deemed it so. Noc Penna was the ruling body over the world, and through their love and kindness, I would become a woman this day. The masses, donning their white silk hooded robes, bowed before the glowing glass scepter held by High Priestess Maunia Nguyen. The moon's glorious light shone down on the world, illumining the souls of all those who basked in it. Within this temple, we gave our thanks and blessings, for this was our way of life. "Please, Naya Lunar, approach the altar," said Maunia. The sea of people in the temple rose from their bowed positions, gazed at me, and smiled. This was to be my moment of sacrament, my prime of life ritual. All those entering adulthood must lay waste to their adolescent past so that they could transcend into virtuous maturity. Two priestesses, accompanied by the new priestess Amelia, made their way toward me, bypassing the crowd. I was nervous, unsure if I was ready. As the three of them advanced, I stood and held my arms outward. With their soothing and graceful touches, they each took one of my hands and guided me to the altar, where High Priestess Maunia waited. "Come to me, my child," she said. Maunia was the most beautiful being I'd ever laid eyes on. Her hair a long, silky light blue, the same color as our moon. Her unblemished skin was as graceful as the sky, and her eyes were a hypnotic gray. She stood tall and voluptuous. Only the most kind, knowledgeable, and beautiful could ascend to the rank of High Priestess, as decreed by the Supreme Sovereign. I stepped up to the altar, turned around, and took one last glance at the crowd. Every soul in the temple stared at me with anticipation in their eyes. I tried to keep myself from shaking too much. There was no reason for me to be uneasy. I'd seen rites such as these carried out many times over the years. Even though I was alone in this, I still gave myself over to the gods without reservation. For me, there was no family or friends. All I had was myself. Nevertheless, being alone didn't bother me at all. As long as I had my sisters, I could endure anything. "We've gathered here to present Naya Lunar before the gods as she makes the transition from child to adult. Let this ritual on her 20th birthday see that she chooses to walk the right path toward ascension and be at peace with nature and Mother Nocturna," announced the High Priestess. Amelia placed her delicate hands on my shoulders. The other two priestesses knelt and removed my shoes. Soon I would see myself bare before all. The prime of life ritual was to be one of honor and pride. "Step into the basin and prostrate yourself, dear," said Amelia. The other two priestesses had already stripped me of my clothing. Pride emanated from the eyes of the crowd. I stepped into the glass tub and got on my knees, shaking with anxiety. Maunia presented above me a large, transparent bowl, filled to the brim with the sacred waters from the rivers of luminescence, located near Mount Lai Hua, just outside the Blue Forest. The water's neon blue glow was splendid, almost magical. I'd been present at many rituals from the time I could walk. Now, however, being at the center of it far surpassed being a simple spectator. This was my time, and I would fully embrace it. You kneel this day as Naya Lunar, the girl, as we witness in our mighty temple before the Nocturnus Pinnacle. Your peers, loved ones, and elders, you will soak in the waters of luminescence and rise as Naya Lunar, the woman, said Maunia. I lifted my head and closed my eyes. Receive the temple's sacrament as a blessing from the moon and the gods of Yakulas. Mark this moment as the day your life truly begins. The High Priestess poured the warm water over my head, and it flowed down my brow, neck, and bosom, covering my entire body. I marveled at the euphoric sensation this blissful liquid bestowed upon my pores. I'd never thought the waters would feel so liberating. Wiping my face, I opened my eyes and smiled widely. All in attendance cheered for me. My rite, indeed, was a blessed day. Stand and be welcomed among your peers. This is your day, Naya, said Amelia. The water dripped from my hair and bosom as I took to my feet. Amelia wrapped a warm robe around my body and rubbed my back. Thank you, I said. She bowed and took a step back, allowing me to exit the basin. Maunia continued with her proclamation of my rite of passage. Removing myself from the presence of the High Priestess, I drew closer to the crowd. One by one, its members gave me warm hugs and kisses on the cheek. I welcomed the affection with sublime tears. I was a woman now, free to set my own path. I'd leave this temple and forge a life for myself in the great lands near Mount Lai Hua, as I'd always dreamed. Restless would be an understatement in describing how I felt about being on my own. I couldn't wait. Congratulations, I'm so proud to have seen you grow over the years into the fine young woman you are today, said Amelia from behind me. Surprised, I turned around and met her smiling gaze. I'd thought she would be by the High Priestess while Maunia concluded her sermon. Are you leaving so soon? It's unwise to leave while the High Priestess speaks. Amelia eyeballed me with a displeased expression. I removed a strand of hair from the side of my right eye before bowing my head slightly. I was just heading to the baths. I wanted to get dressed and start packing. Packing? She gave me a curious glance. Yes, my time in this temple has come to its conclusion. After the ritual, a woman is to set a path of self-determination, isn't she? She sucked her teeth and placed her hand on my right shoulder. You don't have to leave right this instant, Naya. No one will stop you if you choose to stay here for a few more months, or even a few years. I tried to hide my confusion beneath a playful grin. Every woman who's lived within these walls was expected to leave the day of their ritual. I already have a home chosen. The soft caress of her hand on my shoulder turned into a clutching grip. You're different, Naya. The High Priestess would like to extend your stay within this temple. There's much to discuss, she said. The smile on her face melted away, replaced by a piercing gaze. Okay, I stuttered. She tugged me closer, tightening her grasp. Good. Now go and get dressed. Maunia and the Apex Parliament would like to have a sit-down with you after the day's worship. I clenched the hand she had on my shoulder and pulled it off. The force of her grip had begun to hurt. The Apex Parliament? Why would the Parliament want to have a sit-down with me? I asked. You'll see when the time comes. Her voice was belligerent. Of course, Amelia. Please excuse me. I bowed and backed away. This was the first time I'd ever seen her behave so aggressively. Whatever the High Priestess wanted to discuss, it must be important. The baths were located near the back of the room, so I fixed my towel and headed back there. Leaving this temple and starting my journey as an independent young woman was all I'd had to look forward to for the last 3 years. I just hoped my sit-down with the High Priestess and the Parliament would be brief.
"Naya, come here, quick,"
whispered a little girl hiding from the masses under a wooden table beyond the crowd. I recognized her from around the open market located a few blocks away. Her face was always dirty, and her hair was mangled and unclean. Despite the lack of hygiene, behind her unkempt appearance was a beautiful child. Why she was hiding from everyone, I had no idea. I parted the crowd toward the back and knelt to get a better view of her.
"Please, come over here,"
she whispered again. The women were always placed behind the men within the temple, thus giving me an unobstructed path to the girl, and she piqued my curiosity. Most wouldn't notice me leaving anyway now that the ritual was complete. As the masses gave Maunia their full attention, I approached the table the girl was hiding under. Not a soul paid me any mind, and it looked as if Amelia had rejoined the High Priestess near the altar. I tiptoed toward the child as she waved me over with urgency.
"Hurry, Naya,"
she said softly. I squatted under the table and made eye contact with her. She smelled of dirt and roses. The unwashed robe the girl had wrapped over her body gave off the peculiar scent. It was as if she'd been slaving away in a garden all day. "Why aren't you with the other children in the Moonlight's prayer room?" I asked her. She smiled and ran off, leaving me kneeling alone under the table. What was going on? Before I realized what was happening, someone had wrapped a black bag over my head. 2 other people bound my arms and legs and carried me away. I couldn't make a sound. There was a chemical coating the inside of the bag, causing me to feel lightheaded. "Come, this way. We need to get her out of here," someone whispered in haste. I slipped in and out of consciousness as the sedative made its way into my system. "We have her. Put her in the back of the vehicle and let's get the hell out of here," I heard a woman say. With my mind weary, I was barely able to keep my eyes open. "Hurry, we have to get her to Commander Sasha. She needs to be there unharmed while the moon still shines," the woman said. My eyelids shut, and into slumber I fell. Two, Abduction. The damp smell of water and roses threw me back into consciousness. My abductors had removed the black bag from my head and powdered my nose with a substance that woke me from my chemical-induced sleep. I had no idea where I was or why they'd brought me here. Crystal walls and a stream of shining blue water illuminated the subterranean cave I'd been taken to. "Hello, Naya. It's a pleasure to finally meet you," said a woman dressed in a gold and black hooded robe. She knelt and placed her cupped hands into the stream that flowed across from us. After filling both palms with the shining liquid, she splashed herself in the face and removed her hood. "You don't know how long I've waited for this day," she said. Her hair was as dark as night, and her skin was pale with hints of blue. Who are you?" I stuttered. A crowd of masked men emerged from the shadows of the dark burrow surrounding us. The woman ran her damp hands through her hair and took a deep breath. "Who am I? The question is, who are you?" she said without taking a single glance at me. The men removed their masks and sat on the rocks and boulders that made up this enchanting place. "Are you sure she's the one, Commander?" asked one of the men behind her. The woman dipped her hands in the water again. "Unwaveringly sure," she replied. After splashing her face again, she stood and made her way over to me. I was partially lying down on a bed of pebbles, having lost some feeling in my limbs since they'd tied my arms and legs so tightly. She squatted, gazed deep into my eyes, and smiled brazenly. "Oh yes, this is her." "Listen, I'm not sure who you think I am, but if you wanted me to come here, you could have just asked." "I'm afraid that's not a risk we're willing to take. They have eyes everywhere," she said. Eyes everywhere? The more she spoke, the more I questioned her sanity. "Who's they?" I asked. "I'm having a hard time believing this clueless girl is the one we've been looking for," said the same man as before. The woman turned her head to look at him through the side of her eye. "Be quiet," she scolded. I flinched at her tone. Despite her small size, she commanded respect. "I don't know who you are or why you've brought me here, but I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding. Just take me back home and we'll forget this ever happened," I said. The woman brought her face closer to mine, to the point where our lips almost touched. I couldn't back away, as my head was already flush with the gravel on the cave's rocky ground. She climbed on top of me and breathed her cool breath onto my face and neck. I was stunned and at a loss for words. "You poor child. Do you have any idea who you are?" she asked. I fisted the pebbles and rocks I was laid upon, averting my eyes from her. Whoever you think I am, I can assure you that I'm not that person. I'm nobody. I grew up an orphan in the Prime Temple. The High Priestess raised me. I have no family, no real friends, and no status. I'm nothing," I said. She caressed my hair and gazed into my eyes with a welcoming smile. I hadn't a clue what was going through her mind, and being honest, I didn't want to know. This was not how I'd planned my 20th birthday to turn out. I sat up and crawled to my knees, slowly backing away from her. "Listen to me, Naya. You aren't who you think you are. There's a reason you were raised in the Prime Temple, and it has nothing to do with your mother abandoning you," she said. The mention of my mother sparked my interest. "What do you know of my mother?" She turned toward me as I stood up. "More than you know." I dusted myself off and looked around to see if there was an exit I could flee toward if needed. Bright light shone from the opening of the cave. It seemed as if that was the only way in or out. The water stream flowed in the direction of the exit, which served as further proof. Unfortunately, the armed men who'd brought me here were standing directly in the way. "You want to know of your mother? Tell me why that is," the woman said. "What do you mean?" Her question confused me. "I'm asking why you care to know about your mother. You've never tried to seek her out before. In your 20 years, you've never once tried to pursue this knowledge. Why didn't you ask any of the priestesses? Or go to the Consortium of Antiquity and Data to find out your past?" Her voice sounded as if she was irritated. A few of the guards laughed. She shot them a fierce glance, which shut them up quick. "What's the point of trying to find the person who abandoned me?" "You thought you'd been abandoned? And you were never curious as to why?" she asked. I sighed. "I don't dwell on matters I have no control over. That temple has been my home for as long as I can remember, and that's the end of it," I said. "It appears as if you were correct, Commander. She sounds just like her," said the guard behind her. "Blood bonds can never be mistaken. She's a mirror image of my sister," the woman said, Sister? I gulped. She chuckled. There's so much you don't know, so much you must learn. I backed away until my left foot landed in the flowing water. Just tell me what's going on. Why did you bring me here? What is it that you want from me? I asked brashly. I had to ensure we got you out without the High Priestess's knowledge. If I'd asked you to come here of your own free will, there's no doubt they would have sent someone to follow you, or worse yet, stopped you from coming at all. This is my 20th birthday. I was bound to leave that temple either way. You thought they were going to let you leave? She smirked. Of course they were. Why wouldn't they? Because of who you are. Her tone became more stern. And who am I? Who is it you think I am? I crossed my arms and gave her a dismissive look. The answers you seek lie within the waters at your feet. The same waters used during your ritual. Drink, and you will see. I gasped. Are you saying that you've taken me to Mount Laiwa? The guards chuckled. Oh, look, she's catching on, one of them said sarcastically. The woman shook her head while gazing at them with squinted eyes. Leave us, all of you, out of this cave now, she bellowed. Without hesitation, each of them marched out of the cave, leaving me alone with this woman who claimed to be my relative. I'd get to the bottom of her claims soon enough, however. Her abduction of me left little in the way of trust. After the last of the men made their way out, she stared at me and sighed. As I examined her appearance, I couldn't help but notice that many of her features mirrored my own. I didn't want to believe or accept it. As far as I was concerned, whatever family left me on the doorstep of Prime Temple when I was a baby no longer existed. They abandoned me, so I, in turn, would cast them from my mind forever. You doubt me. I can tell by the look in your eyes, she said. My lips twitched. Yeah, well, kidnapping doesn't inspire a lot of trust. As I've said, Naya, I didn't have much choice. There are many things you must learn. I have information that is both thought-provoking and dangerous, she said cautiously. I sat on a large nearby boulder and crossed my legs, gazing at her suspiciously. Maybe if I gave the impression I was willing to sit and listen to her story, she'd lower her guard, which would allow me to make a run for it. It didn't seem as if those guards were directly in the path of the exit anymore. The only problem with my plan of escape was location. If she had brought me to Mount Laiwa, it would take days to get back home on foot, and with her little army of guards in pursuit, I probably wouldn't get very far. Regardless, I had to find an opportunity to save myself. It wasn't my intention to cause you strife. For 20 years we waited for the right moment to seize the opportunity to get you back. Just know that your mother didn't abandon you, Naya. You were taken from her by the authority of the Nocturnus Pinnacle. I flinched, my eyes growing wider with her words. You seem skeptical, she said. Of course I'm skeptical, seeing as you're filling my head with lies. She laughed. Lies do not become those of our kind. Our kind? Yes, Naya, our kind. You, your mother, I, and everyone else who shares our bloodline are descendants of the moon's glow. We are of the courting bloodline. The day of your ritual was to be the day of your sacrifice. We had to get you out of there, and abduction was the only way. My thoughts departed from confusion to complete disbelief. What she was saying was impossible. The moon's glow was a myth. And sacrifice? I refused to believe that those who cared for me my entire life would do me any harm. Lies. All of it. Lies. Naya, I know what you must be thinking. Who is this woman? And does she expect me to believe a single word she's saying? Trust me when I tell you that you needn't take my word for it. Drink of the waters that run at your feet and see the truth. I scanned the stream flowing below me with wide eyes. Now I was sure this woman was trying to kill me. While the waters of luminescence gave a euphoric sensation when felt on the skin, they were toxic when consumed in large quantities. One gulp, and my organs would fail within minutes. I certainly wasn't going to fall victim to her constant lies. I gazed at her with anger and gritted my teeth. If you want to take my life, then do it yourself. Don't try and talk me into killing myself. Naya, listen. No, you listen. You bring me here against my will, speak about my mother who abandoned me, and try to convince me that the only people who ever gave a damn about my well-being are secretly out to kill me? Everything you've said is pure nonsense, and I refuse to listen to any more of it. She lowered her eyes and approached the glowing blue waters with her hands out. As you wish, Naya. I'll prove it to you. Taking a knee, she dipped both of her hands into the stream and filled her palms with the waters. I watched in bewilderment as she raised her hands to her face and poured the liquid into her mouth, gulping it down with no reservations. She repeated the act twice more, all the while staring at me. Only those of our bloodline can withstand the effects. With each drop ingested, we see the memories of our world and the secrets it holds. I knelt to get a better glimpse of her face. She didn't seem to be suffering any effects after having consumed the water. Was this a ruse? Or was she telling the truth? Time would tell, give or take a few minutes. Have I convinced you now? She asked with no hint of deception in her eyes. It was a damning claim she made about the people I'd grown to love. I didn't know how to respond. Still, the water that flowed into her mouth had brought her no illness. What was I to believe? Whom was I to believe? What is your name? Who are you? I asked. My name is Sarsha, Commander Sarsha Cording, and you, my dear niece, are Naya Cording. Not Lunar, as the High Priestess named you to be. My jaw hit the ground, and my knees buckled. Impossible, I exclaimed. No, not impossible, Naya. It is reality. We are the last of the Cording bloodline. You and I are children of the moon's glow. I shook my head furiously. No, it can't be. The gods of Yakulas proclaimed that the Cording bloodline is a myth, that this belief is meant only to lead us astray. Sunulus, the head god within the hierarchy of the gods of Yakulas, forged the moon from a single tear when he saw humankind's self-destruction, and with that tear came a lasting peace that has steered us on the righteous path for thousands of years. It is what the very fabric of society is based upon. Who are you to challenge it? I shouted almost tearfully. Lies, my dear. Everything you've been brought to believe in is a lie. These beliefs are a form of control Nocturnus uses to rule this world. Look into your heart and ask yourself, do you truly believe the only way to absolution is through the gods of Yakulas alone? That to go against Nocturnus is to go against the gods? The institution of Nocturnus is a form of both religious and political slavery. They would have you believe that they hold jurisdiction over you in this life and the next. As much as it may pain you to absorb this knowledge, Naya, I swear it is the truth. Her eyes appeared sincere. All that had been instilled in me since childhood was crumbling before my feet. I focused my gaze on this woman sternly, waiting for her to drop dead from the water she'd drunk. Yet she remained unscathed. The allotted time had already passed. I was at a loss for words. She'd proven to me that the Cording bloodline had to be real, since she hadn't succumbed to death. However, this could still be a ruse. I had no way of verifying that I was at Mount Laiwa, and this water could very well be dyed to appear as if it were that of the luminescence. Yes, that was the only plausible explanation. She was trying to trick me, but it wouldn't work. Pause your weary, bewildered eyes and focus on me, Naya. I know what you're thinking. You needn't even speak your thoughts." "What thoughts might those be?" I questioned. "You believe that this is all an elaborate hoax. I mean, what reason do you have to believe me, right? For all you know, this water could be regular drinking water made to look like luminescence, am I correct?" She smirked. I rolled my eyes. "And I guess you're going to somehow prove to me that you're telling the truth about all this?" "Indeed." Her expression became unsympathetic as she cupped her hands on the sides of her mouth. "Crix, join us, immediately," she ordered. A frail old man entered the cave with a wooden cane in his right hand. "You called, Commander?" the man said. "Yes, get on your knees and drink from the stream," she said without flinching. "Commander?" the man stuttered. "Naya courting requires proof of her lineage. You are to provide her with that proof. Drink from the stream and lay her doubts to rest." I stood there dumbfounded. What was she asking of this man? "But, Commander, what would my drinking this water accomplish?" "My niece needs to understand that only those of the courting bloodline can survive the consumption of the waters of luminescence. Your death will convince her," she said with an emotionless glare. "Commander." "Drink," she shouted. I backed away, gaping. If he died, there'd be no doubt she was telling the truth. However, I didn't know if I could allow him to go through with it. Would I be willing to risk the old man's life just so this psychotic woman could prove her point? The rosy blush in the man's face disappeared as he dropped to his knees. He took one last glance at Sarsha before dipping his hands into the water, cupping a small gulp's worth into his palms. "Wait! Stop!" I shouted. She turned to me with cold-hearted eyes and snickered. "Is this not what you wanted? Proof? Proof of your lineage? Proof that you are born of the courting bloodline?" I looped my hands under the man's arms and pulled him to his feet. "Get out of here! Go!" I shouted. The man stumbled a bit before running out of the cave, discarding his cane. I shook my head. "Are you insane? You are willing to sacrifice the life of one of your men just to convince me of something that's completely implausible?" She sighed. "The fact that you just saved his life is evidence that you see some truth in what I've been telling you, Naya courting." "Lunar. My name is Naya Lunar." "Your head has been filled with so many lies," she exclaimed with frustration. "I won't stand here any longer and listen to your bullshit. Just let me go." "Enough of this." The commander gripped the back of my neck. "We don't have time for this nonsense." She threw me to the ground. "Drink the water and see the truth. The time for debate is over." "Let go of me!" I screeched. She locked one of my arms behind my back and forced my lips toward the water. I fought to keep from succumbing to her will. This water would be the death of me. "Drink, damn it. It's the only way you'll know the truth." My face was within an inch of the water, and I didn't know how much longer I could resist. She pushed down harder on my neck, forcing me closer and closer. "Sarsha!" screamed a man from the opening of the cave. She released me and jumped away. I flew back, then collapsed on the ground next to the stream. "What were you trying to do?" the man said. He approached me and lifted me to my feet. I stumbled a bit before backing away from both of them. "Stay out of this, General Roslow. This is between my niece and me," she barked. I gazed at them with fear in my eyes. I didn't know what to make of any of this. What I did know, however, was that this woman claiming to be my aunt had tried to kill me. I wanted to make my escape, but the man who'd saved me was blocking the only way out. "Is the only tool in your arsenal a damn sledgehammer? You cannot force one to see the truth, Sarsha. One must discover it on their own," the man said. Sarsha sneered and wiped her brow. What do you know of the truth? You're not of the courting bloodline. Those bastards filled Naya's head with lies and superstition. I'm only trying to wash clean that ignorance." This middle-aged man, with his light brown eyes that matched the color of his long, silky hair, took my right hand and traced his index finger along the lines of my palm. "All that she's learned can be unlearned given time, but she must choose to unlearn it, forcing her face into a stream of water that she believes to be poisonous isn't going to encourage much trust, Commander," Sarsha scoffed. "We're running out of time, General. There's plenty of time," he said, cutting her off. "You lack the patience. Let her see the truth for herself. Allow her to come to her own conclusions. That's what her mother would have wanted." He released my hand and smiled at me. "I'm giving you a choice, Naya Courting. You may get on your hands and knees and drink the water, or you may leave, and no one under my command will try to stop you." "What? Do you have any idea what we had to go through to bring her here? You can't just let her go," said Sarsha in shock. "I'm not letting her do anything. It's all up to her. As a child of the moon's glow, Naya is blessed with abilities that she must discover on her own, and it isn't within your or my domain to rob her of that opportunity." Sarsha shook her head. "This is a mistake! You're making a huge damned mistake!" she yelled before storming out of the cave. The general sighed. "I'm sorry for that, Naya. Your aunt can be a bit overwhelming and self-righteous at times." He gave me a kind grin. I backed away farther, still shaken by what just happened. "What is it that you people want from me? Just like I told her I'm nobody," I stuttered. "My dear child, you're far from nobody. Your aunt tried to force the truth upon you, but all those of our movement know that revelations are a choice. You must want to know the truth." I exhaled slowly. "I think I've had enough truth thrown at me for one day. That woman you insist is my aunt tried to kill me. I don't know who you people are, and I don't want to know. Just please, let me leave." The man sidestepped out of my way and held his hand toward the cave's exit. "You are free to leave any time you wish. Just know there are two paths. One is the water at your feet, and the other is through the forest lands toward the mountainside back to the Prime Temple." I gasped, gazed out the cave's exit, and stared at the blue wilderness beyond. "You're saying I have to walk back? I don't even know where you people have taken me. You brought me here, so I'm asking you to please take me back." "I'm afraid that's impossible. No doubt, Nocturnus security reinforced the guard after we took you. We can't risk going back there. This is your journey to make, alone." Nervousness crept into my gut when I understood what he was trying to do. It was then thunder struck in my mind as the realization of where I was dawned on me. I was in the Blue Forest, a place I'd been taught never to go. There was no way I would make it back alive on my own. Why had they brought me here? I was dead the moment they abducted me. "You may leave any time you choose," said the general. I backed away farther into the cave. "You're sending me to my death!" I bellowed. "I'm doing no such thing. I only offer you a choice." "This is the Blue Forest, isn't it? Don't you dare deny it!" He smiled. "I have no intention of denying it, Ms. Courting. The waters of luminescence flow through this dwelling like clouds in the sky. The Blue Forest is the only place we're safe from Nocturnus' reach. It's also the only place where you can discover the truth." "Stop calling me Courting! That bloodline is a myth!" He gritted his teeth, grabbed me by the wrist, and marched us both toward the cave's exit. If you are not of the courting bloodline, if you're the nobody that you so claim to be, then leave. We've made a mistake in bringing you here. Get out of our camp and return to your temple." I was shocked. The general's demeanor had gone from kind to cruel in a matter of seconds. He tossed me to the ground outside the cave into the dirt and gravel. "Leave this place! Forget you were ever here!" he commanded. The militia of armed men all turned their backs on me and funneled into the cave. Sarsha shook her head, turning her back with the rest of them. "You'd better know what you're doing," she said to the general. He smirked before retreating back inside the cave. A large, solid metal panel closed in front of me, sealing the cave shut. I'd been left outside, on my own. "The journey is yours to take. You have no one to rely on but yourself. The truth awaits you. Now leave this place," said the general from within the cave. Shaken, I surveyed my surroundings and gazed at the dark sky. Creatures howled in the distance. I knew they could smell blood in the air. My blood. Of one thing I was confident at this point. There was no chance I'd survive out here on my own. 3. Goddess of the Blue Forest. The blue night sky was surreal and majestic. I'd never thought the blue forest could look so enchanting. Despite its beauty, I knew the dangers that lay ahead. If I were a morphling bear, then this forest would be the dagger wolf. The little band of rebels that brought me out here had refused to open the cave door, regardless of how loud I'd screamed or how hard I'd banged my fists on the door. I'd wasted so much time trying to get their attention that I had no sunlight left. Night had fallen, and here I was, alone in this dark forest with any number of predators lurking around, waiting to turn me into their supper. What those people said about me being of the courting bloodline was preposterous. That was a myth. Everything I'd been brought up to believe told me it was rubbish, so why couldn't I stop the nagging voice in the back of my mind? Something in me felt doubtful, telling me that maybe some part of her story held true. The fact that Sarsha hadn't died when she'd drunk the waters of luminescence perplexed me. It wouldn't have made much sense for them to go through such an elaborate ruse just to fool a nobody like me. None of this was adding up. Either way, it didn't matter now. The one thing I needed to be concerned with was surviving this damned forest. When I was a child, I was told stories about the enchanted blue forest and how no one had ever made it out alive on their own, and that being stuck here was a death sentence. Those who'd made the pilgrimage to Mount Laiwa to fetch the waters of luminescence were the only ones who lived to tell the tale. The lone path to becoming a new priestess or a guardian within the hierarchy of a temple was to make that pilgrimage. It was called the Tests of Pledges. Years of studying and training went into such a journey, and unfortunately for me, I had neither. That militia must have lived out there. It'd explain how they made it from the Prime Temple to that cave without succumbing to the various death traps this place had, under every rock and behind every bush. I approached a large, shimmering blue tree with white leaves. The sap that oozed from its trunk smelled of roses, although I'd been told this sap was highly poisonous. My mind had to be focused. I had to travel through this place with the assumption that everything was out to kill me, including the plants. I'd only been walking for about an hour, and I was already thirsty. Growing up, I'd listened to the new priestesses tell us about the many resources the Blue Forest had if one was wise enough to find them. When I was younger, the only thing I thought about was living on my own. I wish I'd paid more attention back then. I sat on the cool, crispy leaves, leaned against the tree, and sighed. My mouth was dry, and I was feeling lightheaded. The days leading up to my prime of life ritual, I'd been fasting. I was supposed to have broken fast within an hour of the completion of the ritual, but thanks to those idiot kidnappers and their mythological nonsense, I was now stuck out here with no food, no water, no companions, and no hope. I swore before the gods I would pay them back for this. What price does one have on vengeance if it isn't served righteously? Someone said in the distance. Soft growls and snarls resonated around me. I shot to my feet and looked around frantically. Who's there? My voice quivered. I put my back to the tree, inadvertently covering my shoulders in hair and sap. It was so damn sticky that I ended up having to pull strands of my hair from the tree in haste. It hurt like hell. I don't understand. Do you want to die? What purpose do you have here other than serving yourself up for dinner? The voice said again. More growls thundered in my ears, closer and closer. As I pulled the last strand of my hair from the tree, a vine shot out from the ground and latched itself around my arm. No, no, no! I shouted hysterically. With every ounce of strength in my arm, I tried to tug myself loose. Another vine emerged, not from the ground, but from the trunk of the tree. It snagged my other arm and pulled me flush against the tree deeper into the sap. Tender little morsel, what business do you have in my forest? The unknown voice asked. Who the hell are you? What do you want? I was tearing up with anxiety and fear. I want a feast, a raspy voice said, not the same one as before. Deafening footsteps approached me. The sound was almost unbearable. Sap oozed into my hair as more and more vines wrapped around my body, securing me firmly to the base of this damn tree. The blue shimmer emanating from the tree dimmed to nothing. My surroundings became so dark I wasn't even able to see 5 feet in front of me. The foul, hot breath of a dagger wolf huffed in my face, terrifying me. If I weren't so dehydrated, I probably would have pissed myself. Not much meat on her bones. She'll make a nice little snack, nonetheless, said the raspy voice. I was in shock. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that a dagger wolf had just spoken. There'll be plenty of time to feast, brother. For now, let us question this insipid little girl. It takes some real guts to come into our forest alone, said the voice from before. The howling of dozens of dagger wolves rang in my ears. The fact that I couldn't see what was going on frightened me that much more. But I'm hungry, hissed the raspy voice. I gulped. If I weren't tied to this damn tree, I would have dropped to my knees in terror. None of this made sense. The tree had a mind of its own. Everything I was seeing went against the laws of nature as I knew them, and if there were dagger wolves out there speaking, then either I was hallucinating or the enchanted blue forest stories were true after all. When a large torso-sized tongue licked my entire face and chest, I began to hyperventilate. I wanted to vomit. Her taste, stuttered the raspy voice. Alpha, you must taste her. Omega, I thought I told you. No, Alpha, my concern isn't with delicacies. It's something different entirely. Taste for yourself, said the raspy voice. Another tongue soaked me in vile, sticky saliva. I held my breath for as long as I could as the stench was unbearable. 3 sounds of mouth smacking were followed by a gasp. Faint footsteps backed away from me. The breath of the beast huffed directly into my face. I was only seconds away from throwing up what little food I had in my stomach. A courting! Exclaimed the vile creature. The vines of the tree slowly released their grip on me. For what it was worth, I could breathe easily again despite the disgusting saliva oozing from my face and hair. Exactly. This girl is a courting, said the raspy voice. How is this possible? I thought that bloodline went extinct. Evidently it hasn't, hissed the raspy voice. I must be hallucinating. That General Roslow must have drugged me somehow before sending me out to this nightmare. This was a dream. It had to be. "What is your name, child?" the voice asked sternly. With my limbs freed, I wiped the smelly drool from my face with my hands, all the while trying not to gag. "He asked you a question," said the raspy voice. I could still feel the breath of the beast on my body, hot, steamy, and abhorrent. "What are you?" I stuttered. A large paw stepped on my foot, preventing me from backing away. "The questions are with us, human. Now answer the alpha," said the raspy voice. A vine from the tree once again wrapped itself around my torso. I was frozen. If this was a dream, I needed to wake up now. "Must we claw it out of you?" the voice said. I gulped. "I'm Naya Lunar. Please just let me go. I promise you'll never hear from me again. I just want to go home." "Lunar, you say? Are you sure about that? Because you taste like a courting," the voice said. The eyes of the beast began to glow red. Standing in complete darkness, with two beady red eyes focused on me, filled my heart with terror. "This isn't real. I'm dreaming. None of this is real," I shouted. The vine tightened around my gut, making it hard for me to breathe. "If this is a dream, then how can you experience this pain?" said the raspy voice. The vine became so tight that it felt as if my insides were being crushed. I was going to die. Never in my 20 years had I thought I'd die this way. "Tighter!" exclaimed the raspy voice. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, the vine loosened. "Enough of this! Release her now!" bellowed a woman's voice. The howling of what sounded like a sea of dagger wolves echoed in the night. The breath of that beast fled, as did the reverberations of that raspy voice. "You knew of her courting bloodline, yet you continued to inflict harm?" questioned the woman. The sounds of paws galloping through the mud, scattering in various directions, was all I heard for a few short moments. "You cannot blame us, Eve. It is our nature," growled the raspy voice. In a flash of blue and white light, a small explosion formed in front of my eyes, originating from the palms of a ghostly female image. For the first time, I could see whom that raspy voice belonged to. I gaped in disbelief. The voice did, in fact, come from a dagger wolf. The beast yelped in pacification and ran away. The image of the woman began to glow white, moving closer and closer to me. She was gorgeous, as well as terrifying. I couldn't believe someone like her could exist. How was any of this possible? The ethereal beauty of her had my mind in disarray. As she floated toward me, I backed away until I was up against the killer's sap tree. It was as if she were an apparition, come to take me either to paradise or to the abyss. "What's the matter, dear? You look frightened," she said in a soothingly kind voice. I picked up a stick and held it out in front of me. "Stay away!" I yelled. She stopped and gazed at me with worry. "What has become of you? You are a courting, are you not?" I exhaled sharply. "The courting bloodline is a fabrication!" I swung the stick back and forth to keep her as far away from me as possible. With her eyes glowing white, she waved her hand in front of me, transforming the stick in my hands into golden butterflies. I gasped and pressed my back against the tree again, frightened out of my wits. I couldn't tell if this was an illusion or if I was going insane. If the courting bloodline is an untruth, then how do you explain your eyes upon me? Only those of your lineage can see me for who I truly am. All others see only a monster. Only those of your line can speak to dagger wolves, and only those of the courting heritage can change the world as they see fit," she proclaimed. "This is a trick," I stuttered. "What reason do I have to deceive you? Perhaps I should leave you to those dagger wolves if you believe me to be your enemy. Shall I call them back?" The woman gave me a sly grin, eyeballing me from head to toe. Despair overcame me at her threat, and my heart jumped at the prospect of those damned wolves coming back. I was at the mercy of whatever this woman was. A spirit, a goddess, a figment of my imagination. I had no clue. All I did know was that I needed to get the hell away from her. I can see into your mind. From the day of your birth until this very moment, Naya Courting, those who control this world have misled you. It isn't any wonder why General Roslow allowed you to leave. And where did that lead you? Here, to me, she whispered. I shook my head. How can the gods of Yakulis be a lie? They are all. Our entire society, our whole race is built on that belief, I protested. Throughout human history, empires have been forged on the illusions of false gods. Murder, mass destruction, and genocide of entire peoples can be traced to the belief in a god that only existed in the words and fantasies of the men who wrote them. I've seen civilizations and their gods rise and fall over the millennia. The gods of Yakulis are just another ploy, constructed by the powerful to control the masses and keep themselves at the top of the food chain. The only truth that has stood the test of time is the true nature of the world, the courting bloodline. Entities such as myself are tasked with ensuring that bloodline continues. And you, my dear child, are the conclusion of all we've suffered. Soon they will come for you, and one will become 3, she said. Her eyes mesmerized me the closer she advanced. Was she telling the truth? Was I worshipping false gods? All my life I'd never thought for a second that maybe I could be wrong about everything I believed in. Yet here in my presence stood a being that I knew shouldn't exist. If I was the last of the courting lineage, that could only mean one thing. The Supreme Sovereign would...
"Naya, are you out there?"
shouted someone deep within the forest. Lights and torches closed in on the tree I was leaning against.
"I know she's out here. I saw those damned courting fanatics take her from the temple. They had to have gone this way. The Blue Forest is the only place those bastards think they're safe,"
said a soft voice. Listening closely, I recognized who it was. Amelia. The overwhelming sense of relief from hearing her voice made my racing heart slow. I couldn't believe it. They'd found me. Know this, Naya. The world will be delivered into light or into darkness. All creatures in this realm and beyond depend on your strength and will to see the truth. The choice is yours, the entity said dauntingly before vanishing in a flash of blue light. I fell to my knees as the weight of her voice touched every atom of my DNA. I'd never felt anything like that before. It was as if she were speaking to my soul. What was she? What was...
"She's over here!"
shouted a man a few feet away. With the light from their devices flashing in my face, I flopped to the ground and closed my eyes. Whatever strength I'd had left was gone.
"Naya, are you all right?"
the man asked. I was too weak to answer. A warm blanket cloaked my body, and up into the arms of the man I went.
"I have her. We need to get her back to the temple now,"
he said. The smell of him was familiar. I breathed in his scent. Joy filled my spirit at the thought of being saved. I wasn't going to die in this forest after all. With my eyes still closed, I clutched the man's body. Words couldn't begin to describe how grateful I was. If that entity and Sarsha were telling the truth, I'd sure get to the bottom of it once I was back home. For now, however, I was drifting in and out of consciousness, and I needed rest. The answers were there. I just needed to trust my intuition to find them. "4. True Colors." The midnight breeze flowed over my body in a soothing, skin-tingling sensation that woke me from my sleep. People were whispering all around me. so I slowly opened my eyes. I found myself back home in my chambers, surrounded by priestesses and lunar monks. All the windows in the room were open, which allowed the fresh breeze into my bedchamber. New Priestess Amelia, with her long black hair and pure light blue eyes, turned her attention from High Priestess Maunia and gazed at me.
"She's awake!"
Amelia exclaimed. The crowd hovered over me with concern in their eyes. Maunia stared at me with an off-putting glare, as if she was worried about something other than my well-being. It was strange, because I'd never seen them look at me this way before. I was one among many here at the Prime Temple. The fact that they'd gone searching for me was a surprise in itself. Perhaps Noc Pinna considered all its children worth saving, even those who'd gone through the ritual.
"Are you all right? What happened to you out there?"
asked Amelia. "Please, New Priestess, I'm sure Naya has been through enough for one night. She can answer our questions once she's had time to rest and eat," said Maunia. I sat up on the bed and ran my hands through my hair in relief. The filth from that tree had been cleansed from my body. My mud-covered clothes had been replaced with a freshly cleaned, transparent white nightgown. It wasn't one of my own, as I'd packed most of my clothing before my ritual in preparation for my departure. The lunar monks, servants to the priestesses, averted their gaze upon seeing my nude body through the nightgown. They'd taken vows of celibacy in their right to serve in a temple, and any temptations or thoughts of sexual gratification were strictly prohibited. That, however, was the last thing on my mind. What I craved most was food and water.
"The gods of Yakulas smile on you, Naya. They saw you delivered from those fanatics into the arms of your sisters,"
said Guardian Dajan Tyr. I could sense a somewhat discontent in his voice when he said that. This was the first time I'd seen him out of the prayer chamber in months. After he'd made the pilgrimage to Mount Laiwa a few years ago, he'd secluded himself from all and devoted himself to prayer, silence, and enlightenment. He'd only emerge from his seclusion ever so often, or when temple leadership commanded to do so. The Guardians served in the same capacity as the priestesses. However, they were also tasked with spreading the words of the gods of Yakulas and defending them from non-believers. I couldn't believe Dajan had broken his journey to be closer with the gods of Yakulas to greet me. My well-being was insignificant in the face of that.
"You can thank Guardian Dajan for your discovery, Naya," said Amelia. "If it weren't for him, we never would have found you. As you know, he made the pilgrimage to Mount Laiwa, which gave him the knowledge to navigate the Blue Forest."
Dajan's long hair touched my skin as he knelt to bring a glass of water closer to me. I gazed into his gray eyes and we stared at each other for a brief moment, before he smiled and placed the glass to my lips.
"Drink, Naya. You need to regain your strength. You almost died out there,"
he said in a sweet, soft tone. I sipped the water without taking my eyes off him. I'd only seen him once before his journey, and I couldn't believe how much he'd changed. His golden dark skin and dark dreadlocks that weaved down his back had me mesmerized. It was almost as if his body radiated the light that dwelled within his soul. If taking the pilgrimage to Mount Laiwa changed him this much, I'd have to make the same voyage to get the answers I sought. "Please take this and eat. You'll need all the strength you can muster for what's coming," said Maunia. A lunar monk handed me a plate of vegetables, a hunk of bread, and a bowl of soup with his eyes lowered so he couldn't look at my body. I took the bread with my stomach crying for nourishment, dipped it into the soup, and consumed it swiftly. It was delicious, and not to mention that carrot and ginger soup was my absolute favorite. I grabbed a floret of broccoli and ate it just as quickly. My body felt as though I hadn't eaten in days, and this food was really hitting the spot.
What can you tell us about the Blue Forest? And how did you escape those courting fanatics? Questioned Amelia. With my mouth full, I struggled to swallow so I could answer her questions. Did they reveal anything to you? What did they say? They didn't mention anything about your mother, did they? Asked one of the lunar monks out of turn. Without a second's hesitation, the High Priestess grabbed the monk by the collar and shoved him back into the corner. "If you're not a priestess or guardian, leave this room immediately!" she commanded. I gulped down the rest of the soup and stared at the monk curiously as he left. Why would he ask about my mother? How would he even know those rebels were concerned about my mother? It seemed strange. Ignore that monk, Naya. He doesn't know a thing about the questions he asks, said Maunia. I was taken aback by her behavior toward the monk. I'd never seen the High Priestess angry before. Having finished my meal, I handed the plate and bowl to Dajan and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. That was beyond refreshing. Maunia sat on the bed next to me and smiled. We're sorry for allowing those psychotic people to capture you. We'll have to fortify this place with more security until those fanatics have been eliminated, she said. I pulled my knees into my chest and gave her a confused glance. Do you know why they would come after me? Why was I so important to them? I stared at her closely to see how she would respond. Whatever answer she gave would help me to understand the situation I'd found myself in. With that monk's behavior and query regarding my mother, I knew something was hidden that needed to be revealed. And somehow, I was in the center of it all. Maunia caressed my foot gently with a smile. Surely they told you why they took you, Naya. Didn't your captors say anything or give you any kind of reason? Her smooth evasion of my question wasn't lost on me. It seemed as if I wouldn't get the answers I sought from her. It was then I knew that behind her eyes, she was hiding something. It was probably for ransom. Those courting fanatics wouldn't be able to continue their terrorist acts if it weren't for abductions and ransoms, said Amelia. The smile on Mauania's face was gone. She tightened her grip on my foot and moved closer to me. Was it a ransom? Or something else? She asked. What else could it be? My voice cracked. You tell me, she said ominously. Her tone made me wonder if those rebels had been telling me the truth. I'd never seen the High Priestess act like this before. She was more concerned with information about my abductors than with my health. The questions she was asking were the duty of Nocturna intelligence, not a priestess. Tell us what you know, Naya. She dug her nails into my foot. You're hurting me, I said. Pain is something all priestesses must endure. That pain would soon magnify for all those working with the enemy. Is that what you're doing, Naya? Are you working with the enemy? I had no idea why she was growing suspicious of me. I'm not a priestess, and I'm certainly not working with those fanatics. They set me loose in that forest, and I almost died as a result, I exclaimed. Her face lit up as if she'd discovered some hidden truth. So they set you loose, probably after you gave them information. The look on her face became cunning with a hint of deviousness as she squeezed my foot harder. What information did you give them that would spark their mercy in letting you go? My eyes widened. I didn't have any information to give them, High Priestess. I'm a nobody. I don't know anything about anyone. All of those who live within these walls know something, girl. Now what did you tell those rebels? What of the courting bloodline? Spill it, child! Excuse me, High Priestess, said Dajan, but I think she's had enough trauma for one day. Maybe we should allow her some rest. Nocturna Intelligence will be here tomorrow to speak with her. Please, how about we leave her be for now? He placed his hand on Mauania's shoulder.
Without taking her inquiring gaze off me, the High Priestess released my foot and stood. Of course, I'm sure once you're rested, you'll be more forthcoming about your experience with those fanatics. Maunia looked me up and down with disgust in her eyes before briskly walking out of my room. Amelia followed her out and slammed the door shut behind them. Never in all my years of living here had I seen what I just witnessed. My entire life, the priestesses had guided me, taught me, and mentored me with love and kindness. This was the first time I'd ever seen them act so irrationally and angrily. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
I must apologize, Naya. Those courting fanatics tend to get the priestesses riled up,
said Dejan. He filled my glass with more water and handed it to me while covertly gazing at the wall across from us.
If you wish, we can go outside for more fresh air after you've rested.
He continued to pierce glances at the wall in such a way that only I would notice. It took me a while to understand what he was doing, but my heart began to race once I did. Yes, we can go out right now if you want. The anticipation of what was to come rattled my nerves. Rest was immaterial at this point. Maunia had asked about the courting bloodline despite her beating into my head since I was a child that the whole thing was a myth. Within hours of me returning home, it seemed as if all the statements by those rebels that I proclaimed as lies were more and more likely to be true.
Are you sure? You've had quite the ordeal in that forest, he said while nodding slightly. The look in his eyes and the gestures he was giving signaled that the sooner we left this room, the better.
Yes, I'm sure. I could use some air, I said in haste. I removed the blankets from over my legs, then hopped out of bed and proceeded toward the door. Dejan followed with a glimmer in his eyes. I tugged on the doorknob only to find the door locked from the outside. Dejan gasped the moment he saw that the door wasn't opening.
Not again,
he shouted. Backing away toward the open windows, he began to sweat as if he was having a nervous breakdown. Guardian Dejan, are you all right? I asked.
Listen, Naya, we have to leave before they come, he said fearfully.
Before who comes? What's going on? My body trembled with the sight of how scared he was. The temples all over the globe were places of love and peace. Why would he have any reason to be afraid? The temperature in the room increased, and a cloud of white smoke poured in through the walls. A tingling sensation scratched my throat, forcing me to gag. Dejan grabbed the bedsheets and wrapped them around his face.
We have to get the hell out of here,
he screamed through the cloth covering his mouth and nose. I fell to my knees, coughing. The mist blinded me. It felt as if thousands of needles were poking me all over my body. Before I could slump to the floor completely, Dejan stood me up, grabbed me by the shoulders, and rushed toward the windows.
We have to jump, Naya! Do you hear me? We've got to jump!
With my eyes burning, I opened them slowly to see how far a drop we'd have to take. A loud crash resonated behind us. The splinters of wood flew at our heads. A group of armed men with gas masks funneled into the room, marching directly toward us. I couldn't believe what was happening. I'd been deceived. This wasn't the place I'd thought it was. Moments before one of the men could grab us, Dejan and I jumped out the window and landed in a small pond filled with mud and a thin layer of water. The sludge entered my mouth, which forced me to gag more profusely than before.
Get them!
Screamed one of the men from the window above.
Get up, Naya! We have to run! On your feet!
Shouted Dejan, pulling me up by my arms. I was able to see despite the irritation the gas had caused. Dejan took the cloth from around his face and wiped my mouth once I stood up. Words couldn't explain how grateful I was that my room was on the temple's first level. Any higher and we would have leaped to our deaths. What's going on, Guardian? What do they want from me? I asked with my tongue laced with dirt. We climbed out of the pond and sprinted as fast as we were able until we came across the large statue of the god Surrealism, which blocked their view of us. Daejin stripped off his clothes until he was bare. He began to rub mud into his skin.
"Remove your clothes! Hurry!"
Daejin exclaimed. But Guardian...
"No questions. We have to focus on getting as far away from this place as we can. That chemical those bastards pumped into your room will damage your nervous system. Take your clothes off and rub the mud into your skin. It'll help ease the burning," he whispered. The second he mentioned nervous system damage, I ripped my clothes off and tossed them as far as I could. I'd never thought something like this would happen, not in the place I called home for the last 20 years. I'd gone from one nightmare to the next within a matter of hours. This was supposed to have been my haven. Where would I go now? And where would I be safe? "Listen, we have to stay low. The shadow of darkness is on our side. I don't want what happened to me to happen to you," he said.
I continued to rub the mud into my skin as quickly as I could. Confusion and disbelief filled my thoughts, and adrenaline had my heart pumping out of my chest.
Could you tell me what the hell's going on? Why are we doing this?
I whispered. He grabbed my hand and tiptoed out from the cover of the statue. Slowly, he peeked to see if we were still being pursued.
"Oh shit!"
he screamed as a miniature missile soared just inches past his head before exploding a few feet behind us. Wide-eyed, I gasped. Fear almost crippled me upon seeing the fire and smoke from the blast.
"Run for the love of all that is holy! Run!"
he bellowed. Another projectile flew by us, this time exploding a few inches closer. I could feel the heat and force of the explosion with that one. Such weapons shouldn't exist within a temple. "Stop it! Stop firing, you wretched buffoons! We need her alive!" I heard the High Priestess scream from the tower atop the Prime Temple. Her voice and demeanor had transformed completely. A true demon pretending to be a goddess she was. We scurried as fast as we could into the darkness. I looked back and a legion of men with flashlights and high-focused lasers was coming after us. My legs seemed to have developed a will of their own. I'd never run as fast as I did now. One thing was for sure. If they caught us, I was dead. Sarsha and Roslo had been telling the truth after all. I had to be of the courting bloodline. This meant the moon's glow was real as well. And my mother, she...
"Watch out!"
shouted Daejin, pushing me out of the path of a glowing red net that whizzed by us. We lost our footing and tumbled to the ground.
"Ha! You're ours now,"
taunted one of the men chasing us. The darkness of night hadn't revealed what caused Daejin and me to trip. The terrain sloped downward, forcing us to fall faster. The Guardian grabbed hold of a large tree root to still himself. I clutched his waist and pulled myself up. It was then we realized we were dangling off the edge of a cliff.
"You're done for, you courting bitch!"
bellowed the man, running full force toward us. Focusing squarely on our heads, he aimed his weapon and prepared to fire. We were trapped with nowhere to go. The only option for us was down. We held tightly to the tree root as the man drew closer.
"Death is preferable to going back to that hellish place,"
Daejin whispered. I glanced at him. He had a desperate look on his mud-covered face. We focused our attention upward and saw the man hovering above us with a perverted grin.
"In all my years of service, I never thought I'd have the opportunity to see a naked courting. You truly are delicious."
The man licked his lips, gazing at us both.
"So, you must be Naya, the girl they've been grooming since they slaughtered your mother. You have no idea the wonders Nocturnus has planned for you, my dear lady. You know, I'd give anything to have the both of you before turning you over to the High Priestess. Hell, you might even enjoy it."
The expression on his face disgusted me. Daejin and I gazed at each other for a moment. It was then I was certain we were thinking the same thing. Either option led to death, but with this, it would be a death of our choosing. I let go of the root and climbed onto Daejin's back.
"If you're going to try to climb back up here yourselves, it'll save me the trouble of pulling you up once I've got you in my net. Please go ahead."
The man lowered his weapon and watched with an idiotic smile. Daejin looked back at me. I nodded. Together, we decided to go out on our terms. Daejin lifted his left hand into the air and presented his middle finger to the fool before releasing the root entirely.
No!
The pervert shouted, before firing his weapon recklessly. Each one of his nets missed us as we fell from the cliff, down to whatever fate awaited us on the surface. I squeezed Daejin's hand tightly, and he did mine. Just a few days after my prime of life ritual, I was to meet my demise at the hands of the people who took care of me for as long as I could remember. But as quickly as my 20 years had gone, my death seemed slow. Everything appeared to fade away in slow motion. Deeper into the abyss of darkness we fell. At least I wouldn't experience it alone. With my hand gripping Daejin's, I closed my eyes and waited for my fate to seize me. 5. The escape. The mud that covered me had washed away as I lay on a large rock near the shore of a lake I'd crawled upon. I coughed water out of my lungs and took a deep breath. Darkness loomed as the fireflies buzzed around my soaked body. Blinded by happenstance would be an understatement. I'd never traveled beyond the gardens of this place, so I'd had no idea my home for 2 decades sat upon a mountain surrounded by water. I was alive and thankful for it. After climbing to my feet, I stood on the muddy ground, surveying the area around me. "Guardian!" I shouted into the darkness. I didn't see him anywhere. The moment we'd splash-landed into the lake, our grip had been undone. The current of the water had pulled us in opposite directions. The force of our collision had been sheer madness, and I couldn't believe we'd survived that fall. Wiping away what little mud remained in my eyes, I looked around frantically, trying to find him. "Daejin, where are you?" I continued to shout. There was no sign of him anywhere.
Get down there and find them!
I heard a man scream from the top of the hill. The dark night made it impossible for me to see how many were up there, but their lights and the lasers from their weapons gave me a good idea. Searching for Daejin would guarantee my capture, but I didn't care. I had to find him. "Guardian Daejin, where the hell are you? Say something!" I yelled from the bottom of my belly. As I ran along the shore of the lake, searching every inch of water, I tripped and fell over a warm, lifeless body. It couldn't be. I rolled onto my back to get a better look at who it was. "Daejin!" I shouted. I crawled toward him and flipped him so I could survey his face. After placing my ear on his chest, I put my hand just above his mouth to tell if he was breathing. My heart dropped when I realized he wasn't. I immediately dug my index finger into his mouth to clear out anything that might have been obstructing airflow. Time was running out, and I wasn't going to allow this guardian to die on me. I pinched his nose and blew air into his lungs. It took every bit of strength I had to do compressions on his heavily muscled chest. "Come on, Daejin, wake up!" I said, grunting. Once again, I blew air into his mouth, hoping he'd come to. 2 minutes of compressions and still no change or movement from him. "Damn it, Daejin! Wake up!" I screamed, pounding his chest with my fist. He opened his bloodshot eyes, then coughed water out of his lungs, choking and gagging. "Daejin! Daejin! Are you all right?" I asked, relieved. He rolled onto his side and threw up the last of the water before taking a deep breath.
Where are we?"
he questioned. I looked up and saw the guards closing in on us from a distance. "I have no idea. All I know is that we have to run!" He dug into his ears and hawked up the last of the gunk in his system as I pulled him to his feet. We stumbled through the wet terrain and fled deeper into the surrounding woods. The shining blue moon provided us with much-needed light. We had to be as quiet as possible if we were going to escape those damned savages. I knew now why Amelia had been so resistant to my leaving. She'd made that clear the day of my ritual, when she tried to talk me out of going off on my own. Perhaps the sit-down that Parliament and the High Priestess wanted to have with me that day would have led to this. If I hadn't been captured by the Resistance, there'd be no telling what would have become of me. This was utter insanity.
I recognize this place. Come, Naya, this way,
said Daejin. We stepped slowly over the sticks, leaves, and gravel, trying to make as little noise as possible. I couldn't hear those men's footsteps anymore, nor could I see the lights from their weapons. Perhaps we'd lost them. We stopped for a quick rest. I collapsed up against a large black tree, out of breath. Luckily, I'd been able to eat before all this happened. My adrenaline was amplified with all the running and fighting I'd gone through since the ritual. A crippling sadness suddenly overcame me as I leaned against the tree, trying to catch my breath. All those years, my sisters, the people who I thought were my family, all lies. They'd been grooming me for something that I'd been brought up to believe was a myth. Perhaps I was just bait. Maybe they knew those rebels were going to try to capture me the day of my ritual and let it happen. Was I just a pawn or something more? My world was collapsing around me. I didn't know whom I could trust. One thing was for sure, though. This guardian who helped me escape knew what was going on. As of now, he was my only ally. "Do you know where we are?" I asked. I hid my tears from him in an attempt to give the appearance of resilience and strength. But the way he looked at me, I knew that I was failing.
We're in the woods close to the outcast lands. The priestesses you grew up with would never have told you this, but all those who fail the tests of pledges are cast out of civilization. They live out here as society's rejects, and food and water are scarce. There's no way the legions will follow us there.
I wiped my tears and stood. The night was warm, which was a blessing, since Daejin and I had to shed our clothes. With the moon lighting the sky, we could get a clear view of each other. I supposed that was a good thing. Since losing those guards, I felt a little calmer. The gravity of our situation was beginning to dawn on me. I'd never seen a naked man before, and I'd never thought the first time I did would be in a situation like this.
If we stick to the trees, they'll never find us. They most likely turned back once they saw where we were headed, he said.
He tiptoed forward, looking around cautiously. I followed, not too far behind him. "Have you been here before?" I asked.
"Yes. Coming here was one of the reasons for my imprisonment," he whispered.
"Imprisonment?" I shuddered.
"Yes. I was being held captive," he reiterated.
"Why did you come here? Are you a part of the resistance against Nocturnus? I thought you voluntarily secluded yourself from the masses to be closer to the gods of Yokulis." Daejin scoffed.
"The gods of Yokulis."
He crossed his arms and rolled his eyes. "Yes."
"I came out here to give those cast out food and filters to make clean water. Those in the outcast lands aren't members of the resistance, Naya, and I'm not a part of any rebellion. I just don't want the people I grew up with to starve to death out here."
I was taken aback. "Oh, I didn't realize." Daejin exhaled slowly.
"People like you are shielded from the world. You don't know that more than 80% of the world's population lives in poverty. You don't know that thousands of children die of starvation daily in our city-state alone. You don't know that the Supreme Sovereign rules this world with a fist made of blood, death, and torment, all under the guise of faith. So when you say that you didn't realize, I understand. How could you?"
I sensed the sadness and frustration in his voice with every word he said. It was obvious. What pained me the most were the revelations about the world I was living in. Before the events of today, I would have defended the Nocturnus Pinnacle from his accusations vehemently. I was such a fool. It was no wonder those rebels let me loose in the Blue Forest. They wanted me to see the truth for myself. Well, I'd seen the truth, and then some. Those priestesses. No, Nocpinna itself had me completely brainwashed. There was only one course of action I could take. I had to find the resistance and drink the waters of luminescence. I needed to know where I'd come from. I needed to know who I was.
So we meet again, my tender morsel,
an unnerving voice said in the darkness. The hair on my neck stood up and chills ran through my body. It couldn't be. The smell of the beast neared, and my heart beat faster.
"Do you hear that?"
asked Daejin. The creature's footsteps stalked closer toward us. It was the dagger wolf from before. I could sense its thoughts. How the hell had it found me?
"Eve isn't here to save you this time," it growled. "I am hunger and you are food. The laws of nature dictate hunger must be sated by meat, and I'm ready to eat."
Within a matter of seconds, the dagger wolf rushed us and plowed into Daejin. The force of the impact sent Daejin flying until he crash-landed on the dirt and grass far from me. There I stood face to face with a hungry, bloodthirsty beast that longed to feast on my flesh and bones. Fate would have it that I didn't see the age of 21.
"What a special treat you will be. Eve won't be too happy about my eating you. But what can I say? The hunger of a dagger wolf trumps all."
The wolf opened its mouth wide, preparing to chomp my head clean off. Disgusting saliva dripped from its massive teeth. Nearer and nearer, the revolting portal of its gaping orifice hovered over me. I dropped to my knees and my body shook violently. A blue aura surrounded me. Sensations of otherworldly essence flowed within my blood. The dagger wolf flinched and withdrew in a sign of submission. Through my glowing eyes, I saw the blue moon shining as if I were one with the moon's glow. Power. An explosive power was growing inside me. The dagger wolf took off running without saying a word. It yelped, galloping through the woods in fear. I put my hands over my head in an attempt to control the energy overflowing in me. My wits diminished. I'd lost all sense of self. My body no longer belonged to me. I was a passenger in my flesh. In the time of the moon's glow, the courting moon shall begin. Destruction is glory, life insignificant. I chanted in an unfeeling monotone voice. The battle between the essences of Seraph and Vampyre rages within the human. Nigh is the 10-mirror multiverse, brought into creation by thine own hands. Nocturna is nigh, dark emergence is nigh. Maunia is nigh. The force who would oppose the Omni dwells within the underverse. The abyss shall be revealed. Oblivion awaits. The blue aura around me expanded until it consumed all there was. My arms flew wide open, and a massive force exploded from the center of my breast, destroying all as far as I could see. My eyes rolled into the back of my head, and I flopped to the ground, utterly undone. Six. Surprise. The blue glow diminished. An ethereal energy flowed over the ground like light fog passing over a pond. I'd awoken into a surreal state, my body flushed clean of all decay. My blurred sight came into focus. I sat up and looked around. To my shock, everything before my eyes had been destroyed. All that remained was the residue of the energy that exploded from my bosom. The trees, grass, and rocks, all of them, were gone. Off in the distance, I noticed the sun rising. I'd been out the entire night. Fear gripped me. Of all the dangers that lay before me, the one thing I truly feared was myself. There was no doubt about it. I was, in fact, of the courting bloodline. It wasn't a myth, after all. Roslo and Sarsha tried to tell me, but I'd been too damned blind to see it. I knew who the enemy was now, and I had to find out more of the truth. More importantly, I needed to find Eve in the Blue Forest. Maybe she could help me to understand what was happening. What occurred last night scared the hell out of me. I didn't want it to ever happen again. I stood and gazed over at the area. My mind was still rattled, as were my nerves. It didn't quite hit me until I saw the paw prints of that dagger wolf below my feet, that Dae-Jin was nowhere in sight. My heart raced. I did a quick, frantic 360. Dae-Jin! Guardian Dae-Jin! Where are you? It wasn't possible. I knew I couldn't have killed him. Dropping to my knees, I grabbed my stomach and gazed into the distance, tears forming in my eyes. My lips quivered at the thought of what I'd done. Wait, he had to be alive. That dagger wolf knocked him from my sight before that inexplicable explosion. He'd probably seen what was happening and run for his life. I put my head down as the tears began to flow. That couldn't be true. Even if he had run, there'd been no way for him to get to a safe distance in time. I'd killed my only ally, and I didn't even know how. Naya courting, your show of force has called me here this day. I was under the impression you were ready. However, I can see that you are not, said the woman. I stood upright and took a few steps back. This woman had the same appearance as Eve. The only difference was the color that emanated from her. I will return when the pages of life have opened themselves to you. Until then, I wish you luck in your journey on this world. The oval light reappeared, and she turned her back on me, readying to return to wherever it was she'd come from. Wait! I shouted. She turned her head and gazed at me from the side of her eye. You are not ready. I must return to a Seraphelic. The path you face must be traveled on your own. It's the only way you will transcend, she said. The feeling of Dae-Jin's loss had overcome my fear and reason. I ran around her and stood between her and the oval, which I could only assume was a portal of some kind. She wasn't about to leave until I got answers. I needed answers. Please step aside, Naya. As I have said, you are not ready. Not ready for what? What's happening to me? Can you at least tell me that? My tone was resoundingly desperate. I'm afraid it isn't my place to tell you the purpose of your courting bloodline. If you need guidance, you must take heed of the words of Eve. She can help you where I cannot. Hovering just above the ground, she tried to outmaneuver me to get to the oval of light. Wait! Please, just wait! What is Eve? Are you and she gods or spirits? Is that what I'm becoming? A spirit? She smiled. I suppose you can call us spirits. Eve is my counterpart. I am Embla. We dwell on the world of a Seraphelic. That is all I can tell you for now. You, however, should be more concerned with your friend Dae-Jin. He's running out of time. I gasped with wide eyes. Wait, so he's alive? Where is he? I said, hands shaking. You may not be aware of this, but when a portion of your courting power came to the surface, you lost your senses. Nevertheless, a small fragment of your consciousness must have been present, because just before your energy was released, you put your friend in a shielding bubble outside of your time continuum. The dagger wolf triggered a protective mechanism buried deep within you. Your instincts were to protect yourself, so you needn't feel guilty about what happened to you. I mistook that energy release for your ascension. It was my mistake. I should have waited for Eve's consensus. So where's Daejin now? He's still in the bubble you put him in. You'd better hurry, however. He's running out of oxygen. My heart sank. How do I get him back? Tell me! I bellowed. She sighed. If I bring Daejin back for you, do you promise to move out of the way so I can return to my duties on a Seraphelic? You have my word. Tears formed in my eyes. The relief that he was still alive gave me a sense of forgiveness toward myself. She waved her hand and a blue bubble appeared to the side of us. Inside floated an unconscious Daejin. Give this to him when he awakes. She handed me a black robe. Thank you. The tears that filled my eyes soon streamed down my cheeks. You're welcome, Naya. Seek out Eve. My counterpart will guide you, she said. I laid the clothing she'd given me on the ground and ran over to Daejin. The sky cleared and the clouds became white once again. The morning had come, and it seemed as if everything had gone back to normal. I placed my hand on the bubble Daejin was encased in. It shimmered slowly before popping, and I jumped back as Daejin fell to the ground. He inhaled deeply, as if he'd been suffocating, his eyes wide open. Daejin! I knelt and scooped him up in my arms. His breathing was heavy, as if he'd just run a marathon.
Are you all right?
He asked me. I pulled away so I could gaze upon his face. His eyes were red and his lips were purplish. Am I all right? You're the one who almost suffocated, I said. He put his hands on my face and wiped my tears away with his thumbs.
I thought that Daggerwolf got you. Please forgive me, Naya. I didn't expect those damned wolves to be so fast and agile.
I picked up the robe the spirit had given me and covered his body. I was a little confused by what he was saying. Did he not remember what happened? Daejin, tell me the last thing you saw after the Daggerwolf attacked us. He sat up and put his arms inside the robe.
I didn't see anything. That disgusting wolf knocked me out cold. It's a miracle I'm alive.
Having tied the robe around his body, he stood and surveyed the area. His expression was one of confusion, which mirrored my own feelings when I'd woken.
What the hell happened here?
He exclaimed. He walked past me and continued to gaze around the open area. The more he looked around, the more shocked he became.
What happened to all the trees? It looks like a bomb went off.
I stood and dusted the dirt from my pants.
Naya, how did you escape that Daggerwolf?
He gazed at me distrustfully. The tone of his voice was inauspicious. I looked off into the sky, pretending that I hadn't heard his questions. I didn't know him well enough to tell him anything about my courting bloodline. What occurred last night had gone against the very foundations of nature as I knew them. There was no telling how he'd react if I told him the truth. The Daggerwolf almost got me, but... I hesitated to explain further.
But what?
He asked sternly. Something fell from the sky, destroying everything. My voice cracked a bit. The confusion on his face was more prominent than before.
Fell from the sky? That doesn't make sense. How is it that we weren't killed? Something's not adding up.
He turned his gaze toward the ground, then back at me.
And where did you get these clothes?
I gulped and slowly turned my back on him to avoid any other questions.
I feel like there's something you're not telling me. What happened here, Naya?
He pressed. I don't know what happened. If I did, I would tell you, I said. He put his hand on my shoulder and spun me around. What is it, Daejin? I asked, annoyed.
Listen, I know who you are, Naya. I know what you are, even if you don't. There's no need to lie to me. I know about your courting lineage. I risked my life helping you escape that damned temple. The least you can do is be straight with me."
I sighed. If you know all that, then you know more than I do. I don't even know whom I can trust. The people who took me in tried to kill me. I just found out a few days ago that my auntie is the leader of some rebel faction near the Blue Forest. I've seen things that defy the laws of physics and nature, and I don't know what happened to my mother. Did she give me up, or was I taken from her? My whole world is in shambles, Dae-jin. Do you understand that? Shambles! I screamed. Dae-jin stepped away, shaking his head.
Please forgive me if I don't feel too sorry for you. Up until you turned 20, you lived an extremely privileged life. Millions of people across the globe would kill to be where you were. No life is without hardship, and yours is catching up to you. At least you had a warm bed and a full stomach for the majority of your life. The same can't be said for my mother and sisters, who died of starvation in the outcast lands. My father tried to stop the suffering from within. He was a spy for a resistance faction near the Red Lakes of Canton. The Supreme Sovereign had him skinned alive, tore his body into 5 pieces, and sent them on a cautionary tour for anyone brave enough to defy the Nocturnus Pinnacle. I was lucky enough to be put into solitary confinement due to what I saw in the Blue Forest during my tests of pledges. Since then, I have no idea what became of my brother. There was a rumor that he died right alongside my father for trying to help him. A rumor that I'm inclined to believe. I understand you've been through a lot these past few days, but you have to be strong if you're going to survive. Nocpenna's reach is global. We have to trust and be honest with one another. Understand when I tell you that you won't be able to survive on your own. I am a guardian, and I will protect you. You needn't hide anything from me," he said. My attention hung on his every word. I couldn't even imagine the world I'd been shielded from. All I'd been through paled in comparison to his life and the lives of many others. I moved my hair from my face, stood up and stared into his eyes. The gleaming pain I glimpsed in his face validated his determination. I saw in him the suffering I'd been blind to all these years. Well, all that would end. I had to find my aunt and get the truth from her, and hopefully, with the help of Eve in the Blue Forest, I could take down the Supreme Sovereign and ease the worldwide misery Nocpenna had inflicted on the masses for who knows how long. The time of my ignorance and indifference was over. Whatever powers I had at my disposal, I would use them to their fullest extent. But first, I had to learn to control them. I needed to know what these powers were. I stepped to Dae-jin and hugged him tightly. I'm sorry for what you've been through. I truly am. I promise to be open with you from now on. But I really don't know what happened. It just happened, I said. Dae-jin trembled in my arms. His breathing hastened, and I could sense his heart thumping faster. Please forgive me. I haven't felt the warmth of a woman in close to a decade, he said. I hugged him tighter, resting my face on his chest. Thank you for saving my life, by the way. He returned my affection, wrapping his strong, muscled arms around my body. The feeling of his skin on mine gave me comfort. I ran my fingers through his long black dreadlocks that weaved down the front of his chest. This was the first time I'd ever experienced the strength of a man on me. It intrigued me. The warmth of him was plush. We should get going. Nocturna security will undoubtedly be coming to look for us here,
said Dae-jin. He pulled away, gazing into my eyes. You're right, I said. We have to get to the Blue Forest. I have an ally there. But more importantly, we have to find the members of the resistance who abducted me the day of my ritual. A woman claiming to be my aunt was among them. She drank the waters of luminescence right in front of me. I thought it was a trick at the time, but now I see that it might have been genuine. If she's of the courting bloodline, then she has to know what's happening with me. It's going to be a long journey on foot, but we have to try. The resistance may be our best chance of taking down Noc Pinna. Dejin stood fast, gasping slightly.
Why in the name of the gods do you want to go back to the Blue Forest? That place is a death trap, riddled with dagger wolves and mystic demons.
I gazed at him intensively, noticing the uneasiness behind his eyes. He must have encountered something in that forest that traumatized him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so hesitant to go back there. I don't blame you for being afraid, Dejin. The last time I was there, a tree tried to squeeze the life out of me, I said to lighten the mood. Still, uncertainty and fear were reflected on his face.
A tree wanting to devour me would have been a child's dream compared to what I went through the last time I was there. I vowed never to go back. But war slayers working in Nocturna intelligence threatened to kill me if I didn't help find you. Now that you're safe, I have no interest in ever going back to the forest of death. I refuse to fight with fate, he said.
What do you propose, then? Should we split up? I go to the Blue Forest and you find the rebels near Mount Laiwa, I suggested. He flinched.
Absolutely not. We have to stay together. Separating will only hasten our demise. What we can do is head toward the outcast lands and gather as many people as we can to join the resistance that abducted you. The larger the numbers we have, the better our chances at survival. But I have to warn you, there aren't many there willing to fight. Most are afraid of being flayed and put on display.
How far along are the outcast lands from here?
Just over those hills. The view is much clearer now due to all the trees miraculously vanishing, as well as all the grass, leaves, and stones.
He looked at me through the side of his eye with a single eyebrow raised. I glanced away. All right, we'll go to the outcast lands first. I just hope those rebels are still near Mount Laiwa. Dejin walked forward and pointed in the distance.
Do you see that?
He squinted. I strode up to him and saw the remains of a dagger wolf buried halfway in the ground up ahead. There was nothing left but bones. Dejin sprinted toward the site. Wait! I shouted, running after him. Dejin stopped at the dry, dusty bones. He looked as if he was in total disbelief.
What could have done this?
He said nervously. I caught up to him and gazed at the dagger wolf's remains. I was just as shocked as he was. If I hadn't somehow subconsciously trapped Dejin in that bubble, he too would be bones. The fear within me heightened. The fact that I was capable of such destruction scared the hell out of me.
Naya, I'll ask you once more. What happened here?
His voice trembled. I exhaled slowly, as I hadn't the slightest clue what to say. An explanation eluded me. I rubbed my hand across Dejin's shoulder in an attempt to put his mind at ease. Look at me, Dejin, I said firmly. He peeled his gaze off the carcass and gazed at me, biting his bottom lip. I'll tell you everything when we get to the Blue Forest. Maybe she'll have answers for the both of us.
She?
Dejin stuttered. Yes, the entity I saw when I was there. I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's true. Dejin backed away from me with his hands up.
No, you can't make me face her again!
My brow curled as I stared at him, confused. Face her? What do you mean?
I can't go back there. She'll kill me this time.
Droplets of sweat formed on his forehead. It looked as if he were about to have a nervous breakdown. So you saw her when you were there? A sense of relief warmed me.
I did a heap more than see her when I was making my pilgrimage. She wanted my life, my soul. She's an evil spirit set to devour anyone who crosses into her domain. We have to stay as far away from that place as humanly possible, he said, looking into my eyes with a firm grip on my shoulders, shaking me back and forth. I shrugged him off and took a step back. Did you do something to provoke her when you were there? We can't be talking about the same entity. The woman I'm referring to is Eve. She saved me from a pack of dagger wolves, including the same dagger wolf that tried to eat me last night. She also tried to help me understand my courting lineage. I remember it well, Naya. She said, and I quote, "I am Eve, bringer of death, eater of flesh. All those who enter my realm will have forfeited their soul."
I gazed at him and chuckled at the seriousness with which he said that.
Why are you laughing? You think I'm making this up?
No, of course not. It's just that what you're saying is the polar opposite of what I experienced when I was there. If it weren't for her, I'd be dead. He shook his head.
Perhaps she's using you to lure me back there so she can finish me off,
he mumbled under his breath. I gaped with a slight grin. Don't be ridiculous, Daejin. I thought you said we're on the same side and that we have to trust one another. You do remember saying that, don't you? I couldn't believe he was reacting this way. I found it hard to sympathize. The entity that he said threatened his life ultimately saved mine. Imbla told me I had to seek out Eve, and that was what I planned to do. Although I did remember Eve mentioning that all those not of the courting bloodline would interpret her as a monster. That could explain what Daejin had seen. I ran my fingers through his hair. Believe me, Daejin, I'm not trying to dismiss what you went through. I'm just saying that I have to find Eve so she can help guide me to the path I'm trying to understand. I'll happily go there alone if that's what you want. He took hold of my fingers. His touch was soft, yet I could tell he was afraid by his trembling hands.
No, Naya, I trust in you. You're of the courting bloodline, and my faith lies with you. I'll follow you into the Blue Forest if that's what needs to be done.
The sincerity in his vibrant gray eyes was telling. He indeed was a guardian. When we get to the Blue Forest, I'll confront Eve about what happened to you, and I'll try to protect us both as best I can, I assured him.
Let us hope when we get there there'll be no need for protection. If that entity saved your life, as you claim, then maybe she won't lash out the way she did when I stumbled across her little domain.
I smiled. Of course. So which way are the outcast lands?
They should be over those hills northwest from here. We can... You can get on your knees or die, Guardian, bellowed a familiar voice. We slowly turned around. To our horror, that same bastard who'd been chasing us last night was behind us, his weapon pointed directly at our faces. Where in the names of the gods had he come from? He was bruised, bloody, and dirt-covered. By the look of him, I could only assume he'd been caught in the explosion. But how had he survived? On your fucking knees, traitor! Give me a reason to kill you, I'm begging you, he said in a harsh, growling tone.
Daejin put his hands in the air and dropped to his knees.
How the fuck are you still alive?
Said Daejin. The man coughed dirt out of his mouth.
I don't know what that explosion was last night, but as long as I accomplished my mission in catching you two, nearly dying was well worth it. Luckily, I was far enough away that the blast had dissipated by the time it reached me. Nevertheless, as you can see, I was completely unscathed. Had you two not been standing here talking this entire time, you probably could have escaped.
Where did you come from? We didn't see you approaching, I said with my hands up. He laughed.
Daejin knows.
I looked at Daejin, my hands shaking.
Temple guards are given special equipment and weapons. One in particular is a stealth suit that can camouflage in any environment,
said Daejin.
Exactly,
exclaimed the bastard before smacking Daejin over the head with his weapon, knocking him out.
Nocturna intelligence will dissect you for fleeing,
he said to me sadistically, with emphasis on the word dissect. My heart dropped when he aimed his weapon at my chest and fired. Within seconds, I found myself cocooned in an electric net, unable to move.
Tell me, you disgusting creature, where did that bomb come from? He asked.
Fuck you! I yelled, shaking with the electric volts coursing through me. He shook his head with a conniving grin.
They will dissect you, bitch. Dissect!
He hissed like a snake before dragging me away. Seven, the apple. The sense of rotting flesh, mold, and dirt floated in the air, entering my lungs. Bound and blindfolded, I could neither move nor speak. They gagged me, wrapped me in some sort of elastic cloth, and tied me up against a wall. If I could see, there'd be no doubt that I'd see corpses and death all around me. Maybe that sadistic low-level guard was right. Perhaps Nocturnus had planned to dissect me. A door swung open and smashed against the wall so loudly it made me shudder. Hasty footsteps approached me. The smell of flowers and perfume broke through the scent of rot in the room. I'd recognize that fragrance anywhere.
You've made this so much more difficult than it had to be, child,
exclaimed the High Priestess. She fisted the gag around my mouth and ripped it off violently, cutting the sides of my lips. I gasped. She did the same thing to my blindfold, but even more forcefully.
Everything would have fallen into place if those damned rebels hadn't taken you after your ritual. You were oblivious your entire life. It's a shame you couldn't have just stayed that way.
Maunia, please, whatever I did, I'm sorry, just... She backhanded me across the face before I could finish my sentence.
You are to address me as High Priestess.
She smacked me again. You filth. Another slap.
Courting bitch!
She balled her fist and punched me in the nose.
You disgusting whore, just like your mother.
One blow after another, she punched me with hateful fury.
I can't believe the Supreme Sovereign forced me to take care of you for all those years. You disgust me. Your bloodline should have perished decades ago.
I was helpless to stop her as my blood splattered the wall.
You'll die just like your fucking mother.
The back of my head smashed against the steel wall I was bound to. I'd become a human punching bag. I didn't know how much more I could take.
High Priestess!
Bellowed a man from the doorway. Maunia turned around.
What?
She barked.
That's enough. Leave us, now!
The man said. The High Priestess faced me with hate gleaming in her eyes.
Disgusting cunt,
she remarked before spitting in my face.
I said that's enough, Maunia. Leave her be,
the man ordered. The High Priestess stormed out of the room, slamming the door shut behind her. I raised my head. Through pained eyes, I squinted at the man approaching me. Every inch of my face screamed in agony. Blood dripped from my chin onto my breast. The man wiped the blood from my eyes and face with a damp cloth.
I apologize for the High Priestess, Naya. She's kept all that animosity toward you bottled up for decades. I suppose we should have found another caretaker for you, other than the woman whose partner was killed by your mother,
he said. What? I said through pained lips.
Nothing. You needn't worry about the past. What's most important is the future. And trust me when I tell you that the future is now,"
he exclaimed gleefully. He pulled a bottle from his right pocket. I recognized its configuration. It contained healing liquid.
"Do you know how this medicine is made, my dear Naya? Long ago, when the courting bloodline ruled over all of Earth, Nocturna, our planet was renamed Nocturna after the courting dynasty fell. Those within Penna decided the name Nocturna would be more fitting. But that's beside the point. When the courtings ruled, their blood held powers beyond anything the waters of luminescence provided. After the Great War, when my ancestors of the Nocturnus Pinnacle slaughtered those of the courting bloodline en masse, they found that courting blood could heal wounds at an exponential rate. Over the centuries, we've been able to synthesize those healing properties into medicines." He poured the liquid onto the cloth and rubbed it into my face. "So you see, in a way, with the deaths of your ancestors, we've been able to heal millions over the years. Well, only those worthy of Penna leadership, anyway."
My busted lips, swollen eyes, and cracked teeth began to heal until all my wounds were gone.
"They're much better,"
he said with a smile. With my eyes healed, I was able to focus better. I blinked twice to clear my vision of the leftover grime and blood. My heart damned near jumped out of my chest when I saw who it was. It couldn't be. His long, dark locks of hair, gray eyes, and golden, dark skin gave him away. "Guardian Daejin! You're the one?" I shouted. He put the cloth back into his pocket and laughed hysterically. "Why? Why would you help me escape only to do this to me? Why?" I cried. He wiped his hands on a separate cloth from his other pocket, still chuckling. "Stop laughing! Tell me, Daejin, do you enjoy these mind games?" I exclaimed through tears.
"I'm not who you think I am," he said.
"Clearly!"
"That's not what I meant. What I mean is, I'm not Daejin. Daejin is my twin brother. I'm Warslayer Seftis Tyr, head of the Ethnic Cleansing Division in the War Ministry. The Supreme Sovereign submitted my name to Parliament for this position after I took care of the weak," he said.
"The weak?"
"Yes, my father and everyone else who was too weak to make it through the tests of pledges. Those who escaped my wrath end up in the outcast lands."
"But Daejin told me the War Ministry had his father skinned alive," I said in horror. He revealed a blade from behind his back, flashed it before me, and smiled.
"Ah, yes. I still remember his screams. He left me no alternative. When I discovered he was spying for the Resistance, I gave him a choice: exile in the outcast lands or death. Suffice it to say, he made the wrong choice."
He sheathed the blade with a monstrous grin. The closer I gazed at this beast, the more I realized that he wasn't Daejin. He had a deep scar on his right cheek, and his face looked as if he'd been through more battles than I could count. Only the gods knew what plans he had for me. "Where's Daejin now?" I asked, sniffing back tears.
"Back in solitary confinement, where he belongs," he said.
Daejin had told me he had a brother, but he'd never said he was a twin. With the way Daejin described the loss of his family, I could only guess that he didn't know his brother was responsible for it all. I shook my head. "You said something about ethnic cleansing. What did you mean by that? I thought Penna..."
"Whatever you thought you knew about Penna and the Supreme Sovereign is pure facade. people like you are sheltered from the true nature of this place. It isn't until you ascend to the status of priestess nominee that the sugar-coated topping of this world melts away, so you can see it for what it truly is. The Nocturnus Pinnacle isn't a force designed for love. The Supreme Sovereign doesn't direct their temples to spread joy to the common people either. We exist to subjugate the masses. The people don't want harmony and happiness. They always have and always will follow strength. People need to be ruled, to be directed, to be given order. And we must propagate that order through violence. Thus is the nature of humanity.
He licked his lips and smiled.
No, you're wrong,
I shouted.
Am I?
He snarled and grabbed my jaw, then squeezed it tightly in his hand.
It's been this way since the first human beings lived in forests, jungles, and caves. The strong survive while the weak become meat, he said coldly.
He let go of my face and fisted my hair.
With your mother and auntie dead, you are all that's left. We will harvest your courting blood and find the true meaning of existence. What flows through your veins is beyond science and physics. After centuries of waiting, we've finally come across you. A purely potent courting. You are the re-emergence. It was a gamble by the Supreme Sovereign that ultimately paid off. In death, you will serve the gods of Yakulas.
The pace of my heartbeat quickened when he mentioned the death of my auntie. How had they found the resistance so fast? I held back my tears. I was done crying.
What happened to my mother? How did she die?
Your mother and aunt both died the same day in the same way 10 years ago. I remember it well. You were celebrating your 10th birthday with the new priestesses, while just a couple of floors below you, your mother and aunt were being flayed. Nothing brings me more joy than skinning the weak. All those who seek to be a war slayer must make their first kill in their teenage years. I was only 15, but I remember their screams well, their suffering and cries as I drove my knife deeper into their flesh, cutting over and over and over.
He smiled. Gasping in disgust, I hid my confusion under the physical pain I was in. What he said made little sense. My aunt captured me just a few days ago, so he couldn't have killed her. Or maybe that woman wasn't my aunt after all. A piece of this puzzle was missing. All the same, I'd keep my mouth shut about it, just in case that woman was my aunt. The last thing I wanted was to put members of the resistance in danger. They might be my only hope at this point. I lowered my eyes from his devilish gaze. "Oh, I see," I said with sorrow.
Soon, my courting nemesis, the Supreme Sovereign will order Nocturna Intelligence to begin the procedure. Your bloodline will die with you. And after centuries of war, we'll finally have the power to control every living being on this planet. We'll crush the rebels' bones under our feet. Only then can true peace be realized.
The cocky smile on his face pissed me off beyond words.
You were doomed the moment you stepped foot on temple grounds. It's a shame we had to wait until your 20th birthday to proceed with our plans. I know it had to have killed the High Priestess inside. Either way, I'll ensure she doesn't bother you again. We need you healthy for the procedure. Enjoy what time you have left in this world, Naya, even if it is finite. May you be a sacrifice to the gods of Yakulas.
He turned his back on me, walked out, and locked the door behind him.
I had to find a way to free myself from this damned elastic cocoon they'd wrapped me in. If I needed any further confirmation of which side was the evil one, then this was it. I wasn't going to stand by and let them do whatever the hell it was they were planning to do to me. If only I knew how to summon it at will, that power I'd wielded last night. I had no idea how much time I had left before they'd come waltzing in here with their lasers and probes. I had to get free.
It isn't freedom you seek. It is the abundance of universal energy that flows within you, human, said an echoing voice.
Who's there? I said fearfully. I looked down and saw a massive snake with bright green scales slithering toward me.
Is it not I whom you seek? Is it not freedom that is your most pressing desire at this moment? Asked the snake.
What the fuck? I mouthed to myself. I began to tremble in terror upon hearing the snake speak. Was this a part of their procedure or something else?
Did you not say that you had to get free? I have the power to grant your request. But as with all things in nature, there is give and take. What is given always has a price. The question is, human, are you willing to pay said price? Hissed the snake.
I'm hallucinating. You're not real. You just can't be. The snake slid up my legs.
You've seen spirits, talking dagger wolves, and other mystic creatures since you stepped outside these walls. Why now do you think you're hallucinating? I can assure you that you're not. I am real. Everything you've seen is real.
What do you want from me? My skin twitched at the touch of this serpent slithering up my body.
I want to help you escape this place. Don't you want the same? It asked.
Yes, but you mentioned a price. What price are you asking of me? In a puff of green smoke, the snake vanished. The cell I was in became as dark as the night sky. A malevolent feeling crept up my spine as a cloud of gray mist appeared above my head. The snake, quadruple its earlier size, emerged from the mist. Its teeth were as big as my head, and its breath smelled of rotting flesh. The elastic cloth that bound my body turned to dust and fell away. I was free, at least from being affixed to the wall.
I've released you from your bondage. Consider that a gift. What I offer you next comes with a price.
A glaring red apple appeared from the mist, floating toward us. It looked juicy and inviting.
Eat of the apple and gain the power to destroy your enemies. With this, I offer you the power of death, the power of genocide, the power of destruction.
I gulped. What?
Give in to your temptation to destroy all those responsible for the death of your people. You know they deserve it. Eat the apple and claim victory over your oppressors. These people killed your mother. They stole a life that you'll never know. Take the apple and get your revenge, human! Shouted the snake.
Hands trembling, I reached for the apple as the snake smiled. Apple in hand, I smelled the sweet scent of the juicy fruit. The desire to bite was overwhelming, but I was hesitant. I gazed at the grinning snake, unsure of what to do.
Eat, human!
I wiped the sweat from my brow while growing ever so cautious about this offer. Then I remembered what Eve told me in the Blue Forest. She'd spoken of genocide and murder, and here I was contemplating the use of such tactics against my enemies. I paused. I needed to know whom I was dealing with. Staring into the serpent's eyes, I took my hands off the floating apple. First, tell me, who or what are you? I asked. The snake drifting in midair looped itself around my body and hissed. Apep. My name is Apep. Apep? The Lord of Destruction, I whispered to myself. I'd read in the stories of Iacchus about a snake tempting the god Sunulus in the lands of paradise. But the gods of Iacchus weren't real. The courting bloodline was the true faith. I was exceptionally confused now. The serpent slithered off me, pushed the apple back into my hands with its tail, and grinned. Just one bite, and all who have caused you suffering will perish. Do it, human. Take the power for yourself. I glanced at the apple, then at the snake. All the anger from Nocturnus betrayal fueled my lust for revenge. Delicate whispers began to emanate from the fruit, coaxing me to bite. Consume your desires. Taste the sweet nectar of revenge. You know you want to. The urge became unbearable. I opened my mouth, placed the apple between my teeth, and prepared to give in. Revenge would be mine. But at what cost?